from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, more Bitcoin, please. It's the MicroStrategy way. We asked Michael Saylor why he's doubling down on the cryptocurrency yet again, plus what he has to say about the ongoing battle between Coinbase and the SEC. And SpaceX makes history, launching 4 civilians on a 3-day orbital excursion that could usher in a new era in human spaceflight. We'll ask a former astronaut how the crew will spend the next few days on the rocket. And much more than TikTok and podcasts, we'll talk investing and building the next generation, how venture capital firm Lara Hippo is taking investing with Gen Z to the next level. All that in a moment, but first let's get a look at the markets with Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta. Kriti, the September swoon resumes.
Absolutely, Emily. What's interesting here is that we actually ended the day much higher than we were for the majority of the session. We were down 0.8% on the S&P 500, ending 0.2%, even hitting positive territory at some point. So really a story of buy the dip if you look at the intraday charts. But what did they buy? They bought tech, and not just any tech. They bought biotech, they bought semiconductors, and that's really what pushed the NASDAQ 100 into the green. Flat, ending up pretty much flat, but still much higher than the S&P 500. A lot of that had to do with semiconductors, which of course ended up 0.2%. I really want to highlight those electric vehicles, though, because yesterday, Emily, I came onto the show and said, well, electric vehicles are doing really well. They're outperforming. But today, pairing some of those gains, I want to go to retail sales, though, because that's going to be a really big story. Really looking at those terminal sales, we did have August sales coming in at 0.7%. That's compared to an estimate decline of minus 0.7%. So that idea that retail sales are down, well, not so true today. And you can really see the role, I should say, that tech really plays. That's that white line, non-store sales, essentially e-commerce that's contributing to retail sales. Blue is the retail sales line in particular, basically people going to department stores. You can see white has overtaken the blue. Essentially, e-commerce has overtaken walking into stores. Let's go to the next chart here, because I want to show you some of the other pieces of tech in particular. And a lot has to do with big tech in the U.S. versus big tech with China. That divergence continues, that dip continues. Something to watch in the days ahead, Emily.
All right, Kriti, thanks so much. Meantime, MicroStrategy making another big bet on Bitcoin. The cloud company announced it's purchased over 5,000 more Bitcoin for a total price of $240 million. This adds to its already expansive portfolio of around 114,000 Bitcoin, totaling over $3 billion. With me now for more, MicroStrategy founder and CEO Michael Saylor himself. So, Michael, I said doubling down earlier, but it's more like tripling or quadrupling down at this point. Why do that now?
You know, a year ago, we had a $500 million software business and $500 million in cash that was generating 0% yield. Today, we have a $500 million software business growing 10% a year and a $5 billion Bitcoin business that's been growing north of 100% a year. So our strategy is to acquire and hold Bitcoin. We've told the market we're going to do it with equity offerings, with convertible debt, with senior debt and junk bonds, and also with cash flows where appropriate. We saw this as a great opportunity. We sold over the past quarter about $400 million worth of equity at a price that allowed us to buy Bitcoin in a way that we thought would be accretive to all of our shareholders. So we try to choose our spots. But at the end of the day, you know, if you add another 10,000 Bitcoin when the price goes to 100,000, right, it's a lot of money. When it goes to 1 million, it's a lot of money. And our shareholders are long Bitcoin. There's no one buying MicroStrategy stock that doesn't believe Bitcoin's going up. So if you've already risked your money to buy MicroStrategy stock and Bitcoin goes up, you'd rather us own more Bitcoin rather than less Bitcoin, so you benefit from the upside.
And yet there's obviously a looming regulatory crackdown. Take a listen to this from SEC Chair Gary Gensler.
Is it your view that stable coins themselves can be securities?
I think it's, Senator, they may well be securities.
To me, a stablecoin doesn't meet the second prong of the Howey test, that there has to be an expectation of profits from the investment. And so if it doesn't meet the Howey test, it looks to me like it's not a security. Now, maybe you've got a good argument for why some are and some aren't. My whole point is, I think we need to have clarity on this.
Michael, are you at all concerned that regulators could regulate the exuberance that you were talking about earlier out of the market?
I think that the big winner of that entire hearing was Bitcoin. The consensus that's emerging is that Bitcoin is a commodity and Bitcoin is property. And if your use case is to buy Bitcoin as a long-term store of value, then there's broad-based consensus and support for that across Congress, the Senate, the regulators, the administration, and industry here and abroad. I think that there's a need for clarity. I mean, there's consensus that people think the innovations of cryptocurrency could be beneficial for the next 100 years. They're good for the industry. They're good for the Western world. There's also consensus that we would benefit from clarity. And I think Senator Toomey was pointing out that we would all benefit from clarity, but I think that the SECs would probably agree with them. And I think that over time, we can expect that we'll see more clarity with regard to all digital assets. And I expect that will reduce the volatility in the Bitcoin space. It'll increase public confidence in Bitcoin. And it's also going to accelerate institutional adoption and retail adoption of Bitcoin, because these are all good things for the industry.
What about Coinbase versus the SEC? When you see, the biggest crypto platform out there taking on the SEC, does that raise concern if you're just considering getting into this market right now?
Well, I mean, Coinbase is the largest publicly listed crypto exchange in the United States, and the other crypto exchanges are offshore. So I would say Coinbase is probably frustrated. They'd like to see more clarity coming out of government and regulators so they can figure out what they can do and they can't do, and they like to see it faster. And I think that's really consistent with the entire industry view, which is the industry will benefit from more clarity. I think the fact that Coinbase came public this year in the United States was a good thing. Coinbase doesn't offer the same range of products and services that you can get from offshore crypto exchanges. And I think that they would like to compete in a crypto industry, but there are still murky regulations as to what's allowable, what's not allowable. And if all the rules are clarified for everyone and everybody competes by the same rules, I think that'll alleviate some of that frustration.
Meantime, Solana, a 17-hour outage this week after having been on a tear. You've got OpenSeas acknowledging that an employee was trading NFTs on inside information. Do these events suggest that this market, that this technology isn't ready for prime time yet?
Well, in the market, there are three things. There's the blue chip asset, the institutional grade asset, which is Bitcoin. And if you want to buy something and hold it for 30 years in lieu of a bond or in lieu of cash or other forms of credit, then Bitcoin is that commodity store of value. It's in a class all by itself. Then you have unicorns. You have the Solanas and the Binance Smart Chains and the Ethereums, and they're like the Airbnbs and the Ubers of this space, and there are sparks, and there's a lot of money and there's a lot of risk. And if you're SoftBank, maybe you would get into those kind of businesses, and we don't know how those stories end. And then you've got the smaller crypto ventures, right? Or the 6,000 projects out there that are looking for some future. And I think they're all competing in a world where there's some murkiness about what's appropriate, what's not. MicroStrategy obviously only invests in Bitcoin. I think if you're an institutional investor, the only institutional grade asset, the only investable asset you can invest in is Bitcoin, just for the reasons you pointed out. And I think that the SEC is justified in having an interest in the space for all the reasons you point out. And to the extent that they clarify the rules of the road, I think it's going to make it a safer, more welcoming environment for retail investors and also for institutional investors. And the industry will evolve and mature in that way.
Meantime, you have demonstrators in El Salvador burning a Bitcoin ATM, protesting the country's adoption, the country's president pushing the adoption of Bitcoin. what's your take on what this kind of resistance mean in just one country and for the rest of the world?
Well, I think, first of all, the big news here is 500,000 people in El Salvador downloaded a Lightning Bitcoin wallet, and they received $30 worth of Bitcoin. And that's an extraordinary world-shaking event, never happened in the history of the world. And it indicates just how rapidly Bitcoin and Lightning can spread. I think that there are sparks in El Salvador, and there's politics, right? There's an opposition party in the country. There's opposition parties in every single state of the union and every country in the world. And so if the government takes one position, there's going to be an opposition to that position, and it's natural to see that. But I think that the way to think about Bitcoin is the most disruptive technology of the decade. It's making people's lives better, but it's something you can't avoid, which means that everyone's being forced to have an opinion. And so you see some sparks because it's moving so quickly, like a airfoil moving faster than the speed of sound. There's going to be a shock wave, but it's because it's changing the world so quickly.
Well, you have certainly made the biggest bet of them all. Michael Saylor, CEO of MicroStrategy, joining us in an exclusive interview. Michael, great to have you back with us. All right, coming up, combating misinformation one tweet at a time. We'll find out why a Twitter post by Nicki Minaj is getting the White House's attention. All details next. This is Bloomberg.
Certainly as we head indoors, because the weather is getting cooler, that raises the possibility that we could see a surge of cases in places that hadn't seen it in the previous weeks. That said, I'm much less worried about the Northeast compared to the Southeast, which has really been hammered by this virus, in part because of the higher vaccination coverage.
Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security senior scholar Jennifer Nuzzo there, voicing her concerns for winter. And with many still unvaccinated, the task to turn around that trend, it's getting tougher. Misinformation about the virus and vaccines continues to spread on social media, and the White House trying to get ahead of it. White House officials are now in contact with singer Nicki Minaj following a comment she posted on Twitter. Joining us now, our Bloomberg White House reporter Josh Wingrove, and Nicki Minaj, Josh, saying she won't get vaccinated until she does more research. That's why she didn't go to the Met Gala. Says she has a family friend who got the vaccine and is impotent as a result. But of course, the CDC saying no connection between infertility and the vaccine. How exactly has the White House reached out to her? What are their conversations at this point?
Yeah, this one was a surprising one. This one kind of came out of nowhere. We had Angelina Jolie at the White House yesterday, and that was not the celebrity storyline of the White House, believe it or not. So, this tweet and I should say subsequent tweets, including amplifying Tucker Carlson, the of course tremendously influential Fox News personality who spews a lot of vaccine disinformation, misinformation. Nicki Minaj has essentially been doubling down. So the White House has reached out to her people. Low level, they're sort of pumping the brakes, and they said, hey, we'd love to put you on the phone with one of our doctors. Nicki Minaj then, of course, tweets yesterday, I'm going to the White House. She had her outfit picked out, all set. White House had to douse cold water on that. It sounds like that's getting a step too far for them. So essentially, they want to put her on the phone with like an Anthony Fauci or who knows to talk about this sort of thing. And, because she's got such a huge following, this is exactly this sort of type of whack-a-mole type situation where they see these things come up, and before they can respond, it's everywhere. And in fact, this has been one of the criticisms of academics and whatnot, that the administration has been slow to combat misinformation and doesn't really get into the trenches on Facebook or whatever.
Well, talking about getting into the trenches, the White House is trying to do more on social media to reach a younger audience, getting Fauci on TikTok. How is that working?
We'll see. The pickup rates for vaccines at that age are still a problem. And by that age, TikTok users, of course, tend not to be retirees. And, but it's been inching upward. And they missed that July 4th target that they wanted 70% of adults with at least one shot. They missed it in particular and kind of blamed young adults. So they're trying. And Fauci, if you almost name a platform, they've tried to trot Fauci out on it here and there, or they put him on a show or what have you. But their belief is they've got these others kind of less high-profile ways something called the community core. Basically, they believe that the best way to counter misinformation and disinformation is trusted messengers. And the problem for the White House is, for a lot of Americans, they aren't a trusted messenger, right? Particularly diehard supporters of Trump. They're not going to listen to the White House. They'd rather listen to a random tweet from no one they've never heard of.
Right.
So they're hoping these community core, these messengers, pastors, you name it, can help deliver that. And that's why we've seen sort of, they've really gone into sort of a door-to-door almost vaccination effort. And I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that it's working to some extent. 75% of American adults have at least one shot. That's up a fair bit in the last couple of months. It's not going particularly quickly. It's down to an absolute crawl, but it's moving.
Right. Well, good to know they're trying to meet people where they are. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove, thanks so much for that update. Okay. Coming up, SpaceX marks a milestone for space travel and tourism. We're going to take a look at the future of the space economy next with three-time astronaut and Sierra Space executive Janet Kavandi. That's next. This is Bloomberg. SpaceX launched its much-anticipated Inspiration 4 mission Wednesday night, marking a major milestone for the future of the space industry. The flight is the first time an all-civilian crew has led a space mission. Joining me now for the future of the industry is three-time shuttle astronaut and current executive vice president at Sierra Space, Janet Kavandi. Janet, great to have you back here on the show. Given your storied career, your many days spent in space, how significant is this Inspiration 4 mission in the span of space history?
Oh, I think it's incredible. It's groundbreaking, and we were so excited here at Sierra Space to watch. We all watched live here in the office last night as they launched on this historic mission. So, what's good for SpaceX is good for the rest of the commercial space industry. It's certainly good for us. We, of course, believe in a lot of competition, so we're also vying to get some of that business as well. But it does not detract from what SpaceX has done in this historic flight.
Now, they're not just trying to get a good view up there. The crew is performing experiments and research while they're in orbit. What is potentially so valuable about that? I mean, speak to the folks who don't understand why we're investing all of this time and money in space.
Right. Well, a lot of different kind of research is very applicable to life here on the ground. So we've talked a lot about how viruses grow or how, say, cancer cells grow in space. They grow differently in microgravity than they do on the ground. They can grow larger. We can study them better, and we can learn how to make medicines that will attack those particular types of cells. We can learn how to print, believe it or not, organs in space, human organs, so that preferably we would not have to wait for someone to die to get a human organ. We can just print them in space, bring them back, and then be into the people who need them, who failed. So there's a lot of different potential for using research today to make a business for tomorrow, so that companies like ours can build a space station that can house this kind of research, bring people back and forth to those.
You've been to space, of course, multiple times, 33 days in space that you've spent, I believe. Talk to us about the toll that trip, that kind of travel takes on your body, what the astronauts will experience on the way down and once they return.
Right. So on short missions, it's not all that difficult. There are some short-term effects. When you first get to microgravity, a lot of the fluids in the lower half of your body and your legs and lower torso kind of equilibrate through your body, and you'll feel pressure in your head, behind your eyeballs, from that fluid shift. Over a couple, 3 days, you lose that body mass, that liquid, and then you feel pretty normal again. The other thing that can happen right away is some people get something called space sickness, which is similar to seasickness, and it usually lasts a day or two as well. That's why I'm an advocate of being able to stay a little bit longer in space, because by the time you adapt to microgravity, you really start having a good time and really enjoying the view and enjoying what you're doing up there. And then when you come back, you'll have to readjust. Your body has to re-put the fluids up in your head again, so that you won't pass out when you come back to the ground, and you don't have that nausea anymore. So It'll be a little bit different for them. They'll have to come down under parachute, so they'll feel that shock. They'll have the splashdown in the water, so they'll have that impact, and then they'll wait out there a little while until they're rescued by the ship. So it's a little bit different environment than what I'm used to coming down in the space shuttle. All my flights from the space shuttle.
Meantime, your current company, Sierra, is working to pioneer a low Earth orbit economy. Paint the vision for us and the timeline.
Right. So that vision is to have a space station that we talked about earlier that could house people, people who would want to just go for the experience. So imagine a hotel in space. We could house people who want to do basic research, so scientists, and we could also manufacturing facilities. We could have some of these habitats be able to produce those organs that we were just talking about, and then deliver those back down to the Earth. We also use a space plane, and you can see those behind me up there that will come back and land on a runway. So we can bring people back rather than splashing into the ocean or landing under parachutes on the ground. We can bring them back to a runway, much like the shuttle did, although we'll have more flexibility in that we have safer fuels that don't require fans and isolation for people when they first come back. We also provide a more smooth landing, so we glide in like a commercial aircraft, and then anything that's delicate, those organs or those any other kind of protein crystal growth or other things that we've built up in space that is fragile, we can bring that down to the Earth and then disseminate it based on the customers that we have.
All right, fascinating. Well, we'll certainly keep our eye on Sierra and obviously continue to follow this Inspiration 4 mission as it continues. Janet Kavandi, former NASA astronaut and Sierra Space Executive Vice President, thanks for joining us. Well, Cathie Wood's ETFs keep selling Tesla shares. The ARK Innovation and ARK Next Generation Internet ETF sold about $62 million of the electric car maker shares Wednesday. For the month, they've unloaded $266 million worth. Still, Tesla is ARK's biggest holding. Shares are up about 34% since mid-May. Coming up, Gen Z is about a lot more than TikToks and podcasts. Why investors should be taking a closer look into the next generation next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Kriti Gupta back with us for an update on the markets. Kriti, what are you watching now?
Well, Emily, you're about to do a segment on the future of investing, of Gen Z in particular. So I thought, why not? Let's set this up with a conversation about the latest trend in investing, which is essentially retail traders making their presence known in the stock market. So I want to revisit, remember that meme stock mania back in February? Well, it's still kind of there. You can actually see AMC surpassing some of its gains back in February, but it's not the only ones. You have some new meme stocks, some new retail trader bids really emerging. I want to show you some intraday moves of the latest intraday stocks, the latest retail bids. IronNet is the one that in particular caught my eye. You can see the gains are as much as 60% in one day, but IronNet in particular actually preceded or actually exceeded Apple's trading volume in the pre-market. These three stocks were the three of the four largest in terms of volume in pre-market trading, really telling you that those Gen Z influencers, those retail bidders, really making their presence known even before the stock market opens. Emily, I want to end with simply pushing it forward to tomorrow, looking into a terminal chart here, because tomorrow is quadruple witching day, essentially futures contracts, options, all expiring at once, really giving a lot of those institutional traders the options to get in and out of positions fairly easily with a lot more volatility, a lot more liquidity at hand. You can see in the chart, that's really where you start to see a little bit of spike. So something to look forward to in tomorrow's trading session, Emily.
All right, Kriti, thanks so much for that update. Getting to Gen Z now, best known for its influencers, social shopping habits, and devotion to sustainability. They're now interested in reshaping the future of investing. In the first of its kind summit, Gen Z VCs in Lara Hippo will virtually host thousands of attendees from 71 different countries to talk about the next generation of investing. Megan Loist is an investor at Lyra Hippo and founder of JayZ VCs, and she joins us now. Megan, you started this now global community of young people, JayZ VCs, first through a tweet, then through Slack. Talk to us about the vision and how this came together.
Sure, yeah. So I joined the Lyra Hippo team a year ago. I was their youngest investor hired on their team. And what I found very quickly was I really wanted to meet other peers in this space. I wanted to meet more founders. And during the pandemic, it was a little bit harder to do so just because people weren't doing all the things that they typically do in cities. And so, yeah, I turned to, like many Gen Zers, I turned online, I turned to community, and I decided to create my own. And so, yeah, I mean, the community has grown from a group of 30 friends back in November 2020 to now over 10,000 people all over the world. It's a movement. We have tons of initiatives, and now the summit is coming tomorrow, which we're incredibly excited for. You mentioned before, it's 70 people from 71 countries all over the world, 2,300 plus attendees, and really the first of its kind. It's a summit built by Gen Z for Gen Z. So yeah, we're really excited to bring it to life, and community, grassroots, it's all kind of at the center.
You're just 24 years old, and you're working with partners who've been at this investing thing for a long time. What do you think you know that they don't?
I wouldn't even say it's what you know, but I think it's a different perspective, right? When you're investing in the next generation of companies being built by Gen Z, I am that customer. When you think about Gen Z, right, it's $143 billion in spending power. We interact with technology in a different way. We're spending in different ways. I think there's just different type of consumer habits, as you've seen with every generation. And Gen Z just thinks about things differently. There's this sense of authenticity, really putting your values behind your purchasing dollars in a whole new way. And so I think it's more just providing a different perspective because you are the consumer, because you are Gen Z. So I think it's, I'm really grateful to be on the team at Lyra Hippo and meeting Gen Z founders that are around my same age every day, and being able to provide a different perspective again when I'm adding value to founders, when we're working with them and beyond.
You're talking about thousands of Gen Z investors here. What trends are you seeing in terms of where they want to put their money to work and what their priorities are?
Yeah, so I think it's funny, the Gen Z VCs article, which is when I initially coined the term, people didn't even know Gen Zers were old enough to be doing investing. In this article, the top trend that, basically around 100 Gen Zers that I had surveyed was the creator economy. And it's huge, right? There's 50 million creators all over the world, and there are going to be more creators that come to market. I think there's this great stat, it's a third of children in America want to become YouTubers one day. The people that Gen Z look up to, they're influencers, they're creators like Tinks, Charlie D'Amelio, and we're interacting again with creators in a whole new different way than I think generations before, because we're the first digitally native generation. And so on top of that, as the market expands, there's going to be more tools and services that serve those creators. And I think Gen Z is, again, really uniquely positioned to spot those trends early and also add value to those founders that are building those businesses. So the creator economy is certainly one. I think, when you think about sustainability and improving the planet around us, that's also something that's really important. And then things like products and services for the next generation of consumers, the next generation of workers. There's just a lot of really unique, I think, trends that Gen Z is really at the front and center of that we're tracking. Yeah.
Now, we did a whole series on TikTok earlier this year, spoke to some TikTok stars like Josh Richards, who's now trying to use his platform to invest himself, along with another venture capital firm, Animal Capital. What do you see as the role of influencers, and you mentioned creators, in this movement, given that so many of these young people have amassed these giant followings that they can market to, essentially?
Yeah, so I think when you think about creators and influencers, it's you're bringing your platform to life in a really different way. And I think specifically for consumer companies, it's particularly interesting. Like when you have 1 million followers on Twitter or millions of followers on TikTok, that's where your users are. And so I think you can become a really unique organic acquisition engine for specifically companies that are, again, trying to target your exact users. And even Gen Z VCs plays a role in that too. It's a different type of creator, of course, but the future of VC, the future of technology, it's really community-led. And so communities play a role, influencers and creators play a role. And it's I think you're really helping founders that are trying to reach that demographic in a new way that's very authentic to that user. And that's what's the most important for Gen Z. It's reaching that user in a way that it doesn't feel pushy. It feels really organic and authentic, and that's what resonates. It resonates with me, it resonates with my friends, and influencers, creators play a big role in that.
So this summit that you're holding this week, what exactly will folks learn here? Talk to us about the panelists, the kind of discussions you're planning to host.
Sure, yeah. So the Gen Z VCs community and this summit, it's a composition of a bunch of different types of groups. We have full-time people working in venture capital. We have founders that are Gen Z or founders that are not Gen Z building for Gen Z, students that want to enter this space. So it's a bunch of different types of people. And the content itself is really it's geared towards this young generation of leaders. For founders, many of them are first-time founders, right? They're looking for a co-founder. They're thinking about, how do I hire people that are 2 times my age and build an executive team? For investors, what does the future look like? And then for students, how do I break into this industry? How do we create ways to make VC and tech more accessible to everyone? And so the content is really geared specifically and tailored for those folks in different ways. And also, again, it was developed with the community, which is why it's so special. It's authentic, it's organic, and it's coming from the exact pain points that I hear every day as an investor at Layer Hippo, talking to Gen Z founders, and also in the conversations with my friends that are Gen Z investors at other funds. There's just no content that exists that is tailored for these groups, and so we're creating it.
For folks who are watching this, who may not be part of the summit tomorrow, who maybe don't have that much money yet, but want to get into something, they're thinking, should I buy GameStop or do something else? What is your advice?
I think it's easier than ever to start investing your money. Crowdfunding platforms like Republic, for example, you can start angel investing earlier. You can start learning. I think that's the key, right? Like, you need to know that this stuff exists to start, and knowledge is the first point. So join the summit, tune in, and learn about what it means to be an investor, what it means to be a founder, and that's the best way to get started. And then you can start investing in your own way, whether it's the public markets or privately. I think the most important thing is learning and growing and building that skill set.
All right, Megan Loist, Layer Hippo, thanks so much for joining us. Learned a lot from you today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, hip-hop mogul JayZ is embroiled in a legal battle with the man he co-founded Rockefeller Records with, Damon Dash. They are fighting over the non-fungible token rights to JayZ's debut album called Reasonable Doubt. While Dash owns a 1/3 stake in the company, Rockefeller says it owns the album itself, and Dash has no right to sell the NFT. Coming up, cracking the code. We'll speak to the co-founder of online learning giant Baiju on its acquisition of the coding platform Tinker to expand into the US and when we might see the company make its public debut. This is Bloomberg. India's most valuable startup, the online education platform Baiju, now has 100 million students on board, more than double last year. It is expanding to the United States, hoping to reach 60 million more students and 100,000 schools. Online education giant Baiju is paying now $200 million to acquire a new coding platform called Tinker for kids, kindergarten, and up. Joining us now, Baiju's co-CEO, Divya Gokanath. Divya, thank you so much for joining us from India on a very early morning there. Talk to us about the growth you've seen over the last year, how the pandemic has driven that, and how you've met students where they are.
So EdTech has been as unfortunate as the situation was. We were fortunate to be in a segment of positive relevance. So just to put it in terms of numbers, in the first 4 years since the launch of our app, we had 45 million students on our platform. And just in the last 15 months, we had 55 million more students. So EdTech has been put in the spotlight. And I think for online learning itself, what did not happen in decades happened literally in weeks and days. And we saw all stakeholders transitioning online literally overnight, be it parents, be it teachers, be it students. So they all saw the benefit of online learning, what it could do to them since schools were shut down. But if you ask me, Emily, the real opportunity here is on how effective learning can now be. And I would never say that the future of learning is going to be 100% online. It is going to be blended. Like, it's going to be a combination of online and offline learning where students would learn asynchronously, synchronously, depending on their style, their speed, their pace, because that's what technology does to education. It enables it, it personalizes it so that every child can learn as per their speed, their style, their pace. And also learning also will be offline. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there are certain skills like, team spirit, social skills like empathy. All of these things can only be learned offline. So the benefit is that we're going to see a whole new era of learning. Almost the future of learning, I can say, is going to be blended, where you see the best of both the worlds coming together. And the most important thing is that you have the choices in the hands of the learner now.
Now, there are a number of online education platforms that seen growth through the pandemic, Khan Academy, for example. What makes Byju's different, and what are you hoping to get here in the United States?
So if you look at what we've done, we have programs, learning programs for children from the age groups of 4 all the way up to 18, so K-12 segment. And also we're expanding into test prep and upskilling and reskilling, where there is a lot of potential to help students and help learners learn better. So if you ask me, what did we do differently? I think we're a combination. We've always over-indexed on the ed of the ed tech. So we're educationists, teachers who started this. It would be wrong to say that we're just 2 founders. We're actually a strong team of 6 co-founders, all educationists, teachers who started this company. And we use technology along the way as an enabler to enhance the offerings, to make it more personalized, and very importantly, even more accessible, because we are now able to take learning to millions of students. So, and by using technology, so technology in 2 ways, right? One is to make learning so much more engaging, because for a student, if they have to be a self-initiated learner, if they have to love learning, they have to start learning on their own, it has to be in a format which they like. So movie-like videos, game-like interactions, very individualized learning journeys, all of this so that the student stays engaged and also effective, so that you start seeing better learning outcomes. So that's how it's different. But if you ask me now, how are we expanding? How are we planning to do more? It's by giving a student many more choices in the way they learn. And for this, we have both the organic and the inorganic route, right? So the organic route would be investing in R&D and trying to create better and better learning products for kids in the same age group, across age groups, or by even acquiring. And I would write, the actual word is partnering, Emily, if you ask me, right? It's a team fit, it's a product fit. All the acquisitions that we've done so far, be it Epic in the US, be it Osmo 2 years back, or be it Tinker today, all of these enhance our offerings and help students have a choice of how they want to learn, whether they want to learn with a teacher supporting them, or they want to learn on their own. So we want to give more choices to the learner.
You just announced you're buying Tinker, K-12 creative coding platform. We all know how important coding is to our children, but I can tell you as a parent, it's still not necessarily being taught in schools. What is your objective here?
So coding is considered as a very important future skill. If you ask me, I think it's already becoming a present skill. And I would speak as a parent here, Emily, because my then 6-year-old, when he started to learn coding, I could see how it helped him do better even mathematically. He started developing his mathematical skills, critical thinking skills. And I think the joy of creation, the joy of building, the joy of seeing something that you've made come to life, that's what coding gives you. And it's not a topic which works in silos. It's connected to maths, it's connected to science. You can connect it to literally every subject, and that's the beauty of it. So while a lot of people call it a future skill, I would say it's almost a present skill now, which you can also call as an essential skill.
Any concern that growth could slow down when the pandemic subsides and everybody is back in school full time with no concerns about being sent home to work remotely?
The biggest challenge for us, in fact, before the pandemic, was segment awareness. So if you had to ask me what was that one challenge, so that's what the pandemic did. It put EdTech in the spotlight, and we saw people understand the benefits of online learning. So once schools reopen, if you ask me, I don't think that the importance of online learning is going to reduce. In fact, I think that there are certain subjects which can be taught better online, which would continue to remain online, like science and math. But then also students have really missed out on going to school last 1 year. They've missed out. There is a learning loss. There's also a playing loss, a developmental loss, because there's a lot of learning which happens outside the classroom, for which kids need to go to school and continue learning. So, so my answer to you would be that since there is so much awareness about online learning now, since people know the benefits, it's only going to get better, and it's going to be blended.
All right. Byju's co-CEO, Divya Gokanath. Divya, thank you so much for bringing your passion and energy to us this morning. I know it's an early morning for you there in Bangalore. Okay, coming up, smart scooters roll onto the NASDAQ. We're going to hear from the CEO of the Taiwanese startup Goguero about their SPAC merger and plans to take over the Chinese and Southeast Asian two-wheeler markets. And in late news, Los Angeles County is now requiring guests attending large outdoor events like concerts and ball games to show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test from the last 72 hours. Businesses impacted include Comcast's Universal Studios, Six Flags, Magic Mountain. These venues need to comply by October 7th. This is Bloomberg.
Our current view is that it will not begin to get better until at least into the middle part of next year. And it's still very fluid, so we're not even, we don't have a high degree of confidence on that yet.
Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins there outlining a possible timeline of when supply chain issues could start to ease on the back of the pandemic. A similar prediction from German automaker Volkswagen on the semiconductor shortage. That crisis has cut auto production worldwide, left showrooms with fewer models to sell. On the other hand, the tight inventory has led to soaring prices. That has helped VW's U.S. business turn a profit in 2020 for the first time in 8 years. The Taiwanese startup Goguero will hit the public market via SPAC through a merger with Poema, the latest blank check firm to cut a deal with a promising new company. Goguero is best known for its electric smart scooters and swappable battery infrastructure. The deal pushes Goguero's valuation to $2.3 billion and is targeted to close in the first quarter of 2022. CEO Horace Luke spoke with Bloomberg's Stephen Engel to talk about how the company will scale up and expand to other markets.
We recently announced partnership in both China and India, but with expansion always takes global capital. Always, making sure that, as we work with our partners, we operate with the highest standard, with the absolute transparency, so that we can stand shoulder to shoulder, with our partners as we commercialize into those markets. And there's really no better market to do that than the NASDAQ, where technology giants are, like the Microsofts, the Googles of the world, are all listed. SPACs are designed exactly for companies like ours, with solid revenue, with emerging fast growth that takes a little bit of understanding to capture it. In the traditional IPO route, you get maybe about 20 minutes to tell your story. But after all, this is the decade of electric mobility, and we're going to start off with the right foot.
Well, GoTo is an interesting investment that I saw in your press release because, as you said, it's a combination. It was a merger this year of Gojek, which is ride-hailing and food delivery, and then Tokopedia. And they have key investors themselves, everyone from Alibaba to Google, you name it, a long list, Facebook, Visa, and a whole litany of international companies that invested in those two companies. What are they going to bring, and how are you going to leverage that investment from them? I would assume Southeast Asia then is going to be your next big push.
Southeast Asia is the third largest market when it comes to two-wheelers. Of course, the largest being in China, with about 290 million vehicles that needs to be now churned from the previous lead acid-based battery solution to now the more efficient, more powerful lithium-ion solution, where we come into play, right, with the battery swapping with our partner JayZ, the largest two-wheel electric maker in China with 23% market share, and also in partnership with Dachangjiang, the largest ICE two-wheel maker. And together, we're going to create this open network that really allows customers to swap and go as far as long as they want.
Your partnerships that you were announcing in the last few weeks with JayZ as well as DCJ, these are two large two-wheel makers, both gas-powered and electric. What are your realistic goals for the China market? And are you going to bring that swappable battery infrastructure? And is it scalable in a China market that is dominated by those two players?
We see ourselves growing, quick, but also in a very controllable way into China. Now, the team in Hangzhou is, it's staffed, is ready to deploy in Q4. We're going to start with Hangzhou as a pilot market in China, like I said, Q4 this year, and then quickly going to Wuxi right after that, and then expanding to half a dozen cities next year, and then franchising our solution into many more cities after that.
That was Goguero CEO Horace Luke with my colleague Stephen Engel. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We're going to be joined by Ginkgo Bioworks CEO Jason Kelly and Andrea Lamari-Waln from Manhattan Venture Partners. We'll have much, much more on the show tomorrow. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.